The Seven Lady Godivas by Dr. Seuss. To Lady Clementina Godiva, Lady Dorcas J. Godiva, Lady Arabella Godiva, Lady Mitzi Godiva, Lady Lulu Godiva, Lady Gussie Godiva, and Lady Hedwig Godiva. This historical document is admiringly dedicated. Forward. History has treated no name so shabbily as it has the name Godiva. Today, Lady Godiva brings to mind a shameful picture, a big blonde nude trotting around the town on a horse. In the background of this picture, there's always Peeping Tom, an illicit snooper with questionable intentions. The author feels that the time has come to speak. There was not one, there were 7 Lady Godivas, and their nakedness actually was not a thing of shame. So far as Peeping Tom is concerned, he never really peeped. Peeping was merely the old family name, and Tom and his 6 brothers bore it with pride. A beautiful story of love, honor, and scientific achievement has too long been gathering dust in the archives. Dr. Seuss, Coventry, 1939. The 7 Lady Godivas. Old Lord Godiva. On the 15th of May in the year 1066, Lord Godiva, Earl of all Coventry, summoned his daughters to appear before him in the great north hall of the Castle Godiva. For a long silent moment he regarded them proudly, for the 7 daughters of Lord Godiva had brains. Nowhere, he thought with satisfaction, could there be a group of young ladies that wasted less time upon frivol and froth. No fluffy duff primping, no feather, no fuss. They were simply themselves and chose not to disguise it. Girls, announced Lord Godiva, today I leave for the Battle of Hastings. And, he added calmly, I'm going by horseback. Horseback? The sisters looked nervously from one to another. In that day in England, the horse was not taken lightly. True, Lord Godiva had been experimenting with these animals for years, but the horse remained a mystery, unbroken in spirit, a contrary beast full of wiles and surprises. Come, come, chided Lord Godiva, rattling his spurs. Don't be so old-fashioned. This is 1066. Definitely I shall attend the battle on horseback. Lord Godiva had spoken. His metal feet clanked as he led his daughters to the courtyard. Their bare feet followed, cold on the cobbles. Waiting and saddled stood Nathan, his war horse. From the eye holes in his hood gear, he watched the group approaching. Nice horse, smiled Lord Godiva, holding out a lump of sugar. Nathan ignored it. He looked sullen and foreboding. Lord Godiva put the sugar back in the pocket of his armor. He climbed into the saddle and aimed for the drawbridge. Nathan started off in a sidewise sort of trot. Good luck, shouted the girls, waving their handkerchiefs. To victory, shouted Lord Godiva, brandishing his broadsword. But everyone must have shouted too loud. Nathan reared. His front knees dipped low and his hind knees flew high, and he pitched Lord Godiva, Earl of all Coventry, spurs over breastplate, off on his helm. By the time his daughters reached him, the old warrior was dead. Like any normal daughters, the Godiva sisters wept. Then they stiffened their shoulders and faced the facts. Their father was gone, destroyed by a horse. The girls were left with a grim obligation. Horses must be studied and charted, made safe for posterity. 7 hands clasped over Lord Godiva's remains. 7 tongues spoke. 7 pledges were uttered. I swear, swore each, that I shall not wed until I have brought to the light of this world some new and worthy horse truth of benefit to man. It was an oath of heroic proportions. How long this horse truth quest might take was something no Godiva knew, but each one knew she was sad and sick at heart. Each one was in love, each one betrothed. That night, when the 7 peeping brothers came to court, their ladies, all doors of the Castle Godiva were bolted. Nailed to every door was a copy of the oath. Very sadly, Peeping Tom, Peeping Dick, Peeping Harry, Peeping Jack, Peeping Drexel, Peeping Sylvester and Peeping Frelinghusen each dropped his bouquet into the moat. Then they all went home to wait. Teeny Godiva. The next morning, Hedwig awoke in the chill of the dawn. I am the eldest, she thought as she brushed her teeth. I must manage these oaths in a systematic way. She cut sheets of parchment and stitched them together. She bound them with care in a cover of rawhide. To the top of this volume she hitched a bronze chain. Then she knocked at her sister's doors. Follow me, said Hedwig. Just that, and nothing more. 6 solemn Godivas followed Hedwig to the stables. Hedwig hung the volume just outside the stable door. Then she showed them the contents, exactly 7 pages, and each one a blank. Somewhere there are horse truths, Hedwig said briefly. Each of us must find one and inscribe it on her page. An oath has been sworn. That oath shall be kept. So long as your page remains empty of horse truth, so shall your life remain empty of love. A terrible silence filled the stable courtyard. The mind of each Godiva was far away with her peeping. Hedwig stamped her foot. Enough of this wishy-washy schoolgirl mooning. To horse! She shouted and plunged into the barn. A clatter of hoofbeats rang through the yard. Over the drawbridge they made for the fields. Through the fence and the bracken, through thistle and gorse, through moorland and marshland, the great quest was on. But Teeny Godiva was not with the others. Left behind, left alone, left unnoticed, Teeny was too far for any horse to carry. She sat down on a small pile of oats and wept. Her prospects added up badly indeed. No horse truth, no horse truth, no peeping, no nothing. By and by, the oats became very uncomfortable. Teeny got up and went into the stable. Dejected, she wandered past stall after stall. Out in the sunlight, her sisters were trotting, galloping, cantering, earning their love right. Here it was hot, and the horses dozed drearily. No cooperation, she sighed as she trudged down the aisles. At Teeny's elbow, a lazy mare yawned, an enormous crude yawn, uncouth and ill-mannered. Teeny stalked on. Then she sensed something strange, and she stopped and looked back. The yawn, to her amazement, was still going on. Wider and wider the beast's jaws stretched open. The yawn of all yawns, it blossomed, it bloomed from gap stage to gape stage, from gape stage to gawp. At last it reached its zenith and froze there ajar. Teeny had never seen anything like it. I say, puzzled Teeny, maybe this isn't a yawn after all. The horse almost seemed to be inviting inspection. She stepped up to the mare. It stood still and obliging. She stepped up quite close, and she peered down its windpipe. When her sisters returned to the castle for lunch, they found Teeny in bed. From the crown of her head to the scruff of her neck, she was swathed in deep in bandages, ointment, and lint. Nose gone, she said simply. Teeny, poor Teeny, gasped her horrified sisters. Poor Teeny nothing. A radiant smile filtered up through the gauze. You know that mare Uncle Ethelbert gave us last Christmas? With the help of the darling, I filled in my page. A horse truth? A great one, said Teeny. Don't ever look a gift horse in the mouth. In spite of the fact that she was in no shape for kissing, Teeny Godiva married Peeping Tom that very night. Dorcas J. Godiva. In their bachelor household next morning, the Peepings were in high, hopeful spirits. A horse truth had been consummated on the very first day. At this rate, rejoiced the brothers, will all be married within the week. And at breakfast in the castle, Arabella, Mitzi, Lulu, Gussie, and Hedwig Godiva simply bubbled with cheer. The horse truth quest was going to be easy. But Dorcas J. Godiva sat cool and unemotional. It was a fluke, girls, she declared. Teeny was just plain lucky. And if you're planning to loaf around the barns and let the horses do the thinking, I warn you girls right here and now, you'll never win your peepings. Research, believe me, is our one and only answer. What's research? Lulu, puzzled, looked up from her herring. Research, explained Dorcas, is the concentrated examination and correlation of the multitudinous phenomena coexistent in some specific field of activity. For my field, I have selected the study of horse-drawn vehicular transportation. Her sisters were not interested. Leaving them to loll and lounge in the stables, waiting for horse truths to drop in their laps, the analytical Godiva plunged into her research. In buggies and tumbrils and sulkies and shays, she rumbled through the highways and byways of Coventry. Each day a different vehicle, each day the selfsame horse, and she watched his every action with a sharp and eager eye. But Thidwick, her horse, was a hard nut to crack. Stolid and placid, he pulled without emotion. His truths, if he had such, he kept to himself. My wagons, thought Dorcas, must be made more provoking. Thidwick was smug, and he needed a jolt. So she rigged up a gig she called Wagon Superior. She constructed the wagon part purposely low, so that every fourth step, when his hindquarters rose, the boards slapped a rhythmic tattoo on his rump. Dorcas was right. Thidwick's smugness was visibly shaken. In his eyes she detected a flicker of protest. She determined to pique him a little bit more. She rigged up a gig she called Wagon Inferior. Thidwick objected with ill humor and scorn. He had just about become accustomed to the wagon up on top, and now the wretched woman had slung one down below, down between his knees, so he had to trot wide, in a disgraceful, undignified, bow-legged gait. His mood at the end of the day was just foul. Dorcas was elated. In the smoldering depths of his mounting distemper, something was brewing, and it might be a horse truth. So she went a step further. This gig she rigged up she called Wagon Anterior. Never from a horse's point of view had a vehicle been constructed with less consideration. The whole crazy business was backside too. Giddy up, called Dorcas as offensively as possible. That giddy up for Thidwick was the very last straw. He saw red, he saw orange, he saw green, blue, and violet. Something in Thidwick virtually exploded. In the greatest horse and tree conflict that Coventry has ever known, Dorcas J. Godiva discovered horse truth number 2. Don't, was its substance, put the cart before the horse. Annabella Godiva. If ever a horse had reason to drink, it was Brutus. Arabella was wearing the poor devil down. So anxious was she to wed Peeping Harry that even while she slept, she worked the horse like mad. Nightly she would sleepwalk down to the stables, and all night she would sleep chop over the hills. Brutus, of course, cracked under the strain. Somehow he had learned that the fermented mash at the bottom of the silo had a soothing, consoling effect upon troubles. So whenever he got the chance, he'd tip hoof stealthily around to the silo and indulge himself in a little quiet lapping. In no time at all, Brutus had degenerated into a drunken bum. Look at him, cried Arabella one morning. Brutus was suffering the most extravagant hangover ever experienced by man or by beast. He lay sprawled on his rumpled straw, his eyes bloodshot, his nostrils a-quiver. He addled, head swam, devoid of all horse sense. As a colleague in science, he was no help at all. He's drunk, said Arabella, and I want another horse. But Hedwig spoke up sharply. Arabella, I've known Brutus since he was a colt, so high. What Brutus is today, you yourself have made him. You'll stick to him through thick and through thin. Come along, girls. Arabella's sister stalked out of the barn. Arabella frowned down at old besotted Brutus. Through this dissipated hulk lay her only road to freedom. Brutus, she realized, would have to be reformed. Oh, for goodness sake, she snapped. Make a horse of yourself. She tugged at his halter. Slowly, painfully, he staggered to his feet. He swayed there, weaving on 4 legs of rubber. Through the open window, he caught a glimpse of the silo. His murky eyes brightened. Oh, no, you don't, shouted Arabella, and she dragged the poor creature straight out to the pump. Pump stuff, shuddered Brutus. I'll die before I touch it. He did. Arabella phrased her horse truth in the oath book very neatly. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Then underneath she scribbled a big conceited scrawl. By the time you old maids read this, I'll be Mrs. Peeping Harry. Mitzi Godiva. Mitzi, my sweet, rode able-bodied seaman Peeping Jack from his perch in the crow's nest of the bouncing Queen Maeve, plying the trade routes of Ultima Thule. It's 7 years now. How about that horse Truth? Your true love, Peeping Jack. He sealed the letter with a kiss and posted it the next week in the port of Brunaboyne. From Brunaboyne to Cuin Salin to Brenniglag to Thwill on Thine, by sea skiff post and ox-drawn dray, the love note came to Coventry. It reached Mitzi in the stable on Midsummer's Day, that dreadfully hot August of 1073. As she read the brisk, fresh words, Mitzi was transported. The stables, the horses all drifted away. She heard the shrill pipe of seagulls, felt the tang of salt spray, the surge of mighty rollers rolled in her ears. She thought of lobsters and clams. Mitzi Godiva was a true sailor's sweetheart. The visions faded. Once more to her nostrils came the smell of mildewed straw. Mitzi Godiva was back in the barn. Horses! Stupid hay-munching beasts of dry land. If only they were seahorses, that would be different. Seahorses, mused Mitzi, a glorious idea. I shall go at the horse from the nautical angle. In a giddy frenzy of excitement, she plunged into the problems of equestrian aquatics. She swam horses across ponds, and she swam them in harbors. She drove them from chalk cliffs, and she fed them on seaweed. She designed and constructed a horse-propelled rowboat, and she named it the Peeping Jack in honor of her sweetheart. One blustery day in the following March, Mitzi slipped moorings and heading up the river in the Peeping Jack 2. Mitzi at the tiller, Clover on the treadmill, and Dapples, the spare mare, perched high in the poop. Against a stiff, swirling current, Clover pushed on. In 3 hours, she clocked off a good 13 knots. Then she stopped. It was hoof burn. Dapples, commanded Mitzi, smiling and confident. Take your trick on the treadmill. Climb down and go forward. It was a wonderful scheme, and it ought to have worked. And it would have if Dapples had followed Mitzi's instructions. But instead of passing sideways according to plan, Dapples attempted to go over Clover. A most disastrous piece of horseplay ensued. The wreckage of the Peeping Jack 2 was swept down the river. No one ever saw what happened to the horses, but her sister saw Mitzi as she bounced down the rapids, clinging to some flotsam, headed hell-bent for sea. Here's one for the book, her voice came back in anguish. Never change horses in the middle of the stream. Several days later, she was picked off Guernsey, oddly enough by the bouncing Queen Maeve, and the sailor who saved her was good Peeping Jack. They were married at sea by the captain. On the 16th of April, 1078, Lulu Godiva was kicked by her horse, fairly and squarely, smack in the hayloft. Lulu Godiva made a beeline for the oath book. She jotted down her horse truth and left the place forever. Gussie Godiva. The sisters Godiva had dwindled to 2. 10 winters had passed since Lulu wed Drexel. Gussie and Hedwig were still deep in toil, fruitlessly groping for truths in the stables. Neither Hedwig nor Peeping Frelengstein was getting any younger. At 70, he'd lost his job teaching harp at the country day school. The end.